Hi and welcome to this video on creating two effect styles. The first one is a cinematic blue-orange effect to a landscape image, and the second one is to apply final touches to give it a film style effect. This is the raw image that I've selected for this tutorial. The only thing that I've done on the original so far is to crop it at 16:9 and level the horizon, and also I've assigned the Adobe landscape profile just to give it that initial coloration. So let's now create a virtual copy and we're ready to start the editing. So first, let's warm up our image a little bit just to give it that orange feel. And also I'm just going to change the tint and just pull that back just to enhance the blues a little bit. And now let's reduce the dynamic range, because cinematic effect and film does have a reduced dynamic range over that of digital images. So what I'm going to do is pull back on the contrast. You can see the effect that this will be having on the histogram at the top as I do this. I'm going to pull back the highlights completely. I'm just going to pull the shadows down a little bit. I'm going to pull the whites down considerably. You can see it's reducing our dynamic range now. And I'm just going to push the blacks up just a little bit. So we've got a really compressed dynamic range. I am going to increase the exposure just a little bit, just to make sure that we have got a nice balance across that histogram. You'll see shortly how this will all start to come together in the cinematic effect using the HSL and the color grading options. We need to do a little bit of localized editing on this image just to balance it off. The first one I'm going to do is the sky. I've selected the sky. I'm just going to reduce that temperature. I want it to be a little bit bluer than it is. I'll probably drop the exposure as well. I need to make sure I don't get any fringing on this. I'm going to up the amount there just a little bit and just bring that back. I don't want it to be too unnatural. So that's a good balance right there. And the second localized edit I want to do is this bottom right hand corner. It's too bright, it's too distracting. So let's add a linear gradient onto this. I want it to be quite broad. I just want it to be in parallel with the shoreline. So let's just pull that back a little bit. That's good. I want to increase its temperature. I want to make this a little bit more orange. Let's just increase the temperature a little bit at the moment. And then I'm going to change the temperature quite dramatically so it starts to give it an orange tint. Let's pull back the exposure and that should start to balance out the image for us. There we go, and that now gives that a better balance. It's no longer a distraction on the overall image. Let's now start to look at our HSL. So let's bring that down, let's close down our basics, and we'll look at our hue, saturation and luminance. Now I want to work primarily on the orange and teals for this, so I want to give it an orange teal effect. So I want to pull back I want to change the hues of each of those. So let's just pull back on the orange. I want it to become slightly redder. The yellow, I also want to move into the orange zone. You can see the effect that that's now starting to have. And I want to push the aquas into the blues. So we can start to see that this has given us that teal and orange effect now by balancing the hues of the different colors there. So let's now think about the luminance of each of these in terms of how we're going to handle this. So let's pull back on again we're going to be dealing with the orange and teal effects. So let's pull back the orange, and also you can see the yellow is having the biggest impact because there's a lot of yellow in this source image and we've moved it into the orange, so it's having a big impact right now. We'll pull back on this. You can see that change in the luminance really does bring those to the fore. So we've got a nice, you can see the dynamic range again is starting to reduce, so it's given us that great filmic look. So let's now look at our saturation, and I'm going to just increase the saturation of each of these. Not too much, we don't want to oversaturate it. Film is a great medium. The cinematic effect is fantastic, but what we don't want to do is absolutely oversaturate it. So let's bring that up a little bit, and we can see the effect that this is having on our image now. That is starting to look good right there. Now let's finalize our overall effect using color grading. So let's just close down our HSL panel and open up our color grading panel. And here we'll be able to work on the midtones, the shadows and the highlights. Again, focusing on the orange teal, what I really want to do is just pull the midtones into the oranges slightly. I don't want to overdo this again like we haven't been overdoing the others. I'm going to pull the shadows down into the blue teal, but again, not too much. Just going to drag it down there just a touch. And also the same with the highlights to give us that filmic, that cinematic filmic look. You can see again it's compressing our dynamic range. I just want to pull back on the luminance of each of these. At all times you can see the effect that it's having on each of the colours within that histogram. And again, just pull back the luminance. And I think that there is looking pretty good for a cinematic style effect. You could easily imagine that being in a landscape, and the localizations that we did to the sky and to the bottom right really gave this image a little bit of balance. So that's how to create a cinematic effect. We'll now move on to a filmic effect. Now that we've got our cinematic style orange and teal effect, let's move on to the actual creation of making it look like it's on film rather than digital imagery. So we need to soften the image a little bit. So I'm going to come back up to the basics. I'm going to reduce the texture a little bit just to soften the image. I'm going to reduce the clarity as well. Digital images are often quite harsh, and I'm hoping this is coming through for you guys on YouTube okay. You could see, I mean, if I go all the way on each of these slides, you can see the effect that it does have. And likewise with clarity, you can see how it really softens it up. So we obviously don't want to take it to the complete extremes, but what we do want to do is make sure that we've got that right image. And what I really want to do now is just, I'm going to increase the vibrancy. So again, this is just reducing the dynamic range by reducing the saturation. So it's compressing that dynamic range again. And that there has softened our image in the first instance. And we'll now look at the filmic effects. Let's close our basic one down now. We've softened the image and let's have a look at the effects. So the first thing I want to do is add a little bit of grain. Now this will come through if I ramp it right up to 100%. You can see the effect that that's having, but that's not really what I want for this particular image. Around about the halfway mark is around about the right place. Now, one of the tips that I found to give it a better film look is actually reduce the size to 0 and the roughness to 100. Now, if I zoom in on that, you can see the grain that is adding. Once you've zoomed in, you can start to then look at what's right for your image. So I think that probably right there is right on the image itself. So let's just bring that back out, and then what I want to do is just add a little bit of a dark vignette into the corners just to finish off the final image. And I think that there creates a nice visual film style cinematic effect. And here's our final image. And please remember to like and subscribe if you found this tutorial useful. And remember also to check out some of my other videos on Lightroom editing, equipment and on location. It's been my pleasure to create this for you, and I will see you around. Thank you very much for your time.